Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sad Sam. Now, I like things that make me sad. I don't really know why. I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. A lot of people's favourite works of art are those that make them cry. I'm very much the same with music. My favourite music is probably 80% sad stuff. Something that people have made fun of me before. For example, in school especially. But for me, I think there is something about the strength of emotions involved, and I consume art, music and books to feel a whole range of emotions. For me, it almost feels like happiness and laughter is a little bit easier to come by. But when something really hits me, there's something beautiful about it, almost like an ethereal, unexplainable thing. Although I would love to hear some kind of explanation, scientific or otherwise, as to why this phenomenon exists and people like me enjoy sad stuff. I don't know, I think it's fascinating. So today I'm going to give you a run through for you sad boys, sad girls and sad other people of my favourite sad and dark books that may well pull tears from you. By the way, just so you know, next week I'm going to follow up this video with some of my favourite happy books just to balance out the emotions. I'm going to do it by genre today, but that is all I think. So with that and much further ado, let's talk about some sad books. So the first genre I'll talk about is dystopian and apocalyptic books, which automatically lend a certain darkness to the tone within the book just immediately by nature, but these are a few of my favorites that made me particularly sad. And the first one is obvious, especially if you are a regular viewer of my channel, you will know that it is my favorite book of all time, and that is 1984 by George Orwell. This is obviously a heavily surveilled society in which freedom doesn't exist. Nobody is happy within this book, where nobody has freedom and everybody is watched all the time. The darkness of this vision and its believability, I think, is what lends a morbid fascination to the reading experience and possible depths of human depravity that could potentially exist. The real kicker, though, is the ending of this book. When I first read it, when I was about 15 or 16, I couldn't believe these kind of endings could really exist in literature. It left me feeling empty and contemplative in a way I will never forget. So this is my favorite. This made me very sad, so it has to be on the list. Next, we have the Earthseed duology, starting with Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is very similar, really, in a way, but apart from a high level of control in this series, we have almost anarchy within this world that is basically set today. In a world that is kind of slowly dying through climate change. This is more dystopian than apocalyptic, and it has a crumbling government that basically doesn't really work. It's every person out for themselves. What makes this so impactful is the meaninglessness of life in a story told by a narrator that is the epitome of empathy. Our hope is constantly built as relationships and fortunes grow, only to be dashed by this brutal world. This story speaks to the value of community and looking after one another, and holds true depths of beauty and despair. This book is full of sadness, it's full of beauty, it's full of empathy, and it is one for you sad people out there. I highly recommend it. Finally, in this section, we have another rather obvious one, which is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Anyone who has read this will know that this is an extremely heavy read. We follow a man and a son traveling and surviving in a post-apocalyptic Earth that is on its knees. You can trust nobody in this world and everything looks hopeless. But the core of the story really is the father-son relationship. This is a story of true love, and this is what provides the raw emotions, both in its beauty and tragedies that befall the pair in the story. I am frightened to reread this in the future after my son is born very soon. If I do so, I may well cry the whole book because it is just so heavy and so beautiful and so impactful. So if you want the darkest of dark reads in a post-apocalyptic world, you should read The Road. Next up, I'm going to talk about some sci-fi books, and the first one is Flowers for Algernon, another potentially obvious one for those who have read it. This is a story about a young man with severe learning difficulties who receives treatment to make him smarter. Unfortunately, unknown before this treatment begins, it is a two-way journey, and we see him fall back into his previous state after being extremely smart. The sadness of this story is manifold, beginning with the loss of something that was more valuable to our character than anything in his life. It also highlights prejudices and ill treatments of those who are less fortunate. For me, though, it gave off a palpable feeling of utter loneliness, and that some people must feel in such situations. A wonderful, beautiful book, light on the sci-fi, but very emotionally impactful and highly recommended. Next up, we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler again. This is a very loose sci-fi that follows a black woman in the 1970s who repeatedly gets transported to antebellum US in the time of slavery. Therefore, she gets dragged into the slave trade and witnesses the evils of the times from the perspective of someone from a much more progressed society, although not as progressed as we are today, of course, but that perspective really kind of emphasizes the difficulties that people went through in these times. As any slave tale now reads with modern sensibilities, the themes are almost overt in a way, but necessarily so, I think. Therefore, the emotional weight in this book comes from witnessing the events of the like we know to have happened at astonishing rates. But it is all done with absolute brilliance and just subtlety and nuance. It is a beautiful book, it is a very difficult book, and it will make you feel very sad. We also have Hyperion by Dan Simmons. In this book of 7 stories, there is one in particular that I can think of, and again, if you've read it, you know what I'm going to say. It is The Scholar's Tale. Similarly to The Road, this story focuses on parent-child relations as a man watches his daughter's slow death as she ages backwards. Need I say any more? That is a horrible concept. The story is emotionally draining and told with true deftness that makes you want to squeeze your loved ones tight after reading it. Another one that I am frightened to read once my child is born, but super impactful and just an amazing book, by the way. Please read this. Finally, in the sci-fi section, I have Dying Inside by Robert Silverbuck. Another story light on the sci-fi. We follow a man with telepathic powers who is gradually losing them in his middle age. This forces him to reassess his life and reevaluate the decisions that led him to where he is now. Whilst maybe not quite a tear-jerker, it subtly explores themes of identity and regret, and may leave the reader with a feeling of melancholy driven by ambition to make sure that you cultivate a life of meaning and love and not focus on your ego or your career. This is a subtly emotional book that just makes you question your life decisions, and it was a wonderful little read, so I do recommend this for you sad people. The next genre is going to be fantasy, starting with probably yet again another obvious one for those who have read it, and that is The Realm of the Elderlings. I need only say one word for those who have read this series, and that is Fitz. You know what I mean. This is fantasy's ultimate sad boy character. He goes through several roller coasters in each of the 3 sub-series that he is in within this whole larger work. Oftentimes his woes are self-inflicted, but in that I find him to be quite compelling because of his relatability. We've all made stupid decisions that prove to be costly, and he makes many of them, but like I said, I just find him quite relatable in that way, even if you want to strangle him at times. But the world doesn't really help him either, as many world-shaking events cause him utter devastation. The book The Fool's Errand, which is the first book in the 3rd series of the whole series, being a prime example of that. And if you've read it, you know what I mean. What makes these books so compelling is Hobbes' famous depth in characterization. All characters are so well drawn that you can't help but get attached, and so amplifying any emotion felt by Fitz and other characters. These books are full of heart, and Fitz will feel like a family member by the end of this series. So that is Realm of the Elderlings by Hobbes. I need to reach down. Oh, sorry. Next one is, I'm just going to say an author, and that is John Gwynne. I have to mention the author in general here, as the man is just an absolute master at jerking those tears from your eyes in all of his books. Every single one, he will do it. How he does it is through found and real families. He gradually builds character relationships in a way that feels realistic, often joining unlikely and downtrodden or troubled people together. And these people start to heal each other, and you start to root for them. This creates a high level of beauty and warmth that makes you want to just crawl into the books and be friends with them yourself. And then he just smashes you over the head by taking said characters away from you, a la the school of George Martin, who, now I think about it, I probably could have talked about in this video, but I'm not going to. But yeah, Song of Ice and Fire, obviously. It's not done in a gratuitous way though, by the way. In terms of Gwyn, it feels realistic, and you are left needing to pick yourself up again for the rest of the journey. His books are always beautiful and devastating, and I highly recommend them for you sad people. And finally, in the fantasy section, look how well prepared I am. I have Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This trilogy is set in a world that is plagued with kind of semi-regular apocalyptic events. So this backdrop sets us up for a generally miserable setting in general, right? But where the story really takes the biscuit is that its main theme is coming to terms with the grief of losing a child. A common theme in today's video, and again, one that I would be frightened to reread soon. The realistic nature of this story lends gravitas to the struggle of the woman's journey. But it is a story that is important and says a lot, and is just an extremely difficult read, extremely sad. So that is my last fantasy recommendation for you sad people. The last section I'll talk about is contemporary fiction, that kind of genre that is loose and hard to define. And I'm going to try and speed up a little bit because I want people to not get too sad, and I don't want this video to be too long. So the first one I'll talk about is A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro, another story that focuses on grief of losing a child. This is a big theme in this video. It also explores a feeling of displacement, both in coming to terms with resettlement as well as to a whole country's place within the history of the world. It is all done with a beautiful subtlety and fantastic atmospheric writing. This ending of this book absolutely broke me, and I just wanted to go straight back to the start and read it again because everything was just so subtle and beautiful. Absolute masterwork piece of writing. Also by Kazuo Ishiguro is Remains of the Day. What first appears to be a simple story of the life of a butler turns into a heartbreaking story of regret and life decisions, turning into loneliness and questions of what could have been. Again, this one kind of doesn't feel like it's going to be sad, but really hits you towards the end. Ishiguro really knows how to just subtly build you up and then hit you down at the end, and this is another great example. The next one I'll talk about is Beloved by Toni Morrison, a story that takes slavery as its main theme and so has similar effects to that of Kindred. What makes this even more tragic though in a way is the fact that this story, which involves a horrifyingly devastating event, is based on a true real life story that happened back in the 1800s. It is a difficult read both because of the subject matter of slavery, but also the writing style makes this quite a difficult read. It's very trippy, it's very non-linear, and it is not for the faint of hearted for both of those reasons. But for people who love a really deep and difficult read, this is a high recommendation from me. Next up, I'll talk about The Green Mile by Stephen King. This is a rather subtle one for Mr. Cy King, taking a handful of unlikely characters and turning them into friends in this death row prison. This is a story of pure empathy that explores built-in racism and the poor treatment of those with learning difficulties. King gets you attached to the characters, as he always does, even though you know what the result will be at the end and that it will crush you. So yes, this one was extremely emotional at the end after building you up with the expectation of, you know, certain death at the end. Very emotional, very impactful, and like I said, quite subtle for Stephen King, and I absolutely loved this book. Finally, in this section, I will talk about The Kite Runner. Oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of the author. I'm so sorry. Obviously, it'll be up on the screen. It's been a while since Hosseini, since I read this, but some scenes will be forever burned into my memory. Ultimately, what I remember is it being about friendship, regret, and atonement. A very personal story that is set in a very impersonal, difficult setting that makes you question the narrator, but you become wrapped up in the emotions of him nonetheless. This is a brutal book, but again, one that is highly worthy of your time, especially if you love deep, dark books. So that is all for the contemporary and for this video, actually. So that is it for the end of the video. I hope you're feeling okay, not too down after all that heavy subject matter. I could have said way more within this video, but I don't want it to go on forever, and like I said, I don't want to just make you absolutely miserable. For example, I missed out some classics like Of Mice and Men, Little Women, and Frankenstein, all very sad, difficult books. But these are some of my absolute favourite sad books, so I would love to know which sad books you love, so have a conversation with me in the comments down there, and let me know if you've read any of these books and if you felt similarly or not. I have actually been accused of being a robot, but this proves that I do get sad quite a lot. I just may not always shed a tear, but that is definitely changing as I get older, and I expect it will when my child comes pretty soon, which, by the way, if you didn't watch my update video, please go and check that out. It is my last video, and I'll pop a link in the description. As for anyone who watches regularly or semi-regularly, there will be a lot of changes coming to the channel as my big life event is coming very soon indeed. Like I said before as well, I will balance this out with some happy reads next week, so you have that to look forward to. So if you liked the video, please press like. If you're new to the channel, please think about subscribing and joining my journey. But that is it for today's video, so I'll see you soon. Goodbye.